Alright everybody, in today's video we are going to be learning how to create your own beautiful soloing patterns. So this is going to be the super simple and easy process that I use to create patterns, and while the whole point of this is to be able to create your own patterns, if you want some of the patterns that I have come up with, check below this video when you're done to get my document 10 essential soloing patterns. So there are going to be some similar patterns, the ones that we're going to create today, but they're going to be all over the fretboard. So you can learn how to not only make these patterns, but take them all over the fretboard and use them in your solos. So without further ado, let's get started. So as you see here, what we got on the screen is we have all of the natural notes, which are the notes in the key of C major, and they are on the first and second strings. So I'm really big on learning the guitar neck on one string at a time because it allows you to do stuff like what we're going to do today. It makes it a lot simpler to make your own patterns than if you're playing in positions. You can make patterns when you're playing in positions for sure, but it's easier and simpler doing it this way. So how are we gonna do this? Well, it's very simple. We are going to start by just taking one note on one of the strings and another note on another one of the strings, and then moving them up to the next set of notes. So what do I mean by that? Let's take a look at this C note that's here on the second fret of, the first fret of the second string. So we'll take that note and then let's pick another note that's pretty close by that's on the first string. So let's pick this F note actually. So we got C and F, they're both on the exact same fret. So C and then F. So now that's actually enough to create a cool soloing pattern. So we're going to now, instead of just playing that C and F over and over, which actually that can sound cool too. You can get creative with just those two notes, but what we're gonna do is now move each of those two notes up what's called diatonically. So for those of you who have never heard that word diatonically, or the derivative of that, diatonic, it just means according to the key. So sometimes when we're moving things around on the guitar, we just think, oh, move everything up 2 frets. Now sometimes if you're moving diatonically, everything might move up 2 frets, but it's not always going to be like that because we need to stick to the key. So that's why I have all the notes of the key outline here. So now, instead of playing C and F, we're just gonna move up to the next available notes that we have. So the next note after C is gonna be this D on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string. And then we also have, instead of the F before, we're gonna move that up to G here, also on the 3rd fret of the 1st string. So it just so happens that in this case, we're moving up diatonically, but they are all just moving up the same amount of frets. So now if we play both of those in sequence, we started with the C, F, and then now we're gonna play D, G. So we're just gonna continue this exact same pattern for as far as we can go. So we're gonna move D up to E here, you see the little box, and then G is gonna move up to A. So now we can play this sequence, C, F, D, G, E, A. Again, we are still sticking to the key. It just so happens that we've gotten lucky and only had to just move everything up exactly the same shape, just having everything in the same fret. But now you're gonna see that's gonna break. So the next note in the key after this E here on the 5th fret of the 2nd string is gonna be F, which is only 1 fret higher. But the next note diatonically after the A that we just left off on is gonna be B, which is 2 frets. So now we're gonna get this shape which is this F and this B right here. So it's those two notes. So if we play everything we have so far, we have C, F, D, G, E, A, F, and then B, and then so on and so forth. I think you're starting to get the idea. So then we will play G and then C, then A and D, B and E, and then C and F. So at that point, we pass the 12th fret, and now everything just continues to repeat exactly as like what we started from. So let's see what that whole entire pattern would sound like in sequence. And now I'm past the 12th fret, could keep going. And that's actually not in the diagram, but I went all the way up to the 20th fret. So this is why knowing the notes on the guitar fretboard is so important, because it allows you to move on one string at a time or just groups of a couple strings at a time. And it's a lot more logical to make these patterns because every time we move the pattern up, we're always going the same direction on the fretboard. So a lot of times we're not going the same direction if we're trying to do a pattern like this in a position. We might hear the sound of the notes going up, but our fingers are moving backwards on the fretboard, and that starts to make things confusing. So let's hear actually what it sounds like if I improvise a little bit with that pattern. So of course, when we're improvising with these things, we don't just want to play it up and down like that, right? We could also play it in reverse. I didn't do that yet. But we can mess around with sort of taking each of those cells, moving it forward, moving it back, skipping around, right? We don't have to play it in sequence all the time. We could just as easily go like this instead. Play C and then F, and then maybe jump all the way up to this G here on the 8th fret of the 2nd string, and C, so on and so forth, jumping around. So let's just see. I'm going to put on a drum track and try to be creative with that idea. So this pattern that we made. Right, so as you can see right there, there's lots of different things you can do with that. And that's also, by the way, I like to practice these types of things with just a drum track at first, because we don't really have to worry about making chord changes and that kind of thing. Once you start dealing with chord changes, it does make things a little bit more complicated because you want to watch out for notes that might potentially clash with the next chord change and so on and so forth. But that's a little bit beyond the scope of this video today. We're just focusing on making the actual patterns, all right? So let's try a pattern now. We just did 2 notes there, but we can obviously be more creative than that. So what if we made a pattern with, let's say, 4 notes? Now we could sit here for an hour making different patterns with 4 notes. So we're not gonna do that. We're only gonna do 1. But let's start on this D here. D on the 2nd string, 3rd fret. So what if I take this D and then maybe move it down to C? So we'll take 2 notes on this string, on the 2nd string, and then we'll take another 2 notes on the 1st string. So D moves down to C. And then what if we skip up? Because before, we don't want to do the same thing we did before we moved up to this F here. So no, let's not do that. Let's take this D, go down to C, and then we're going to actually go up to G, and then maybe up again to A. So we'll have this pattern. D, C, G, A. So we get some really cool intervals there, especially if we So once you've come up with an idea like this, that's literally all you need for your pattern. The idea is you come up with a little cell that you play in one area of the fretboard, and then you just keep moving it up diatonically, right? This is why it's so important to understand what key you're in, what notes are in the key you're in, because you're not going to be able to do this stuff if you don't understand it. So now we have this pattern, which goes D, C, G, A, and then we can take that whole entire structure and move that upwards. So now we move both of those notes up diatonically. So instead of D, C, G, A, now we're gonna start on E instead, because we started on D before, right? Hope you're following the logic of this. So now we're starting on E, and we're gonna move down to D, and then across and over to A, and then up to B, right? So before we started on E, we started on D, now we're starting on E, and then before, when we were on the first string, the note that we started on was G, right? We did D, C, G, A, but now we're doing E, D, A, B. So let's hear what that sounds like. E, D, A, B. So I'll play those two in sequence. The first one, and then transposed up diatonically. So you might find also that some of the ones that you come up with are a little more difficult to play super fast. Again, this is a creative thing that we're doing here, right? We're not just practicing guitar, but we're practicing our creativity. So the whole idea behind this is that we are going to be able to do this on the spot eventually, actually. So sometimes when I'm soloing, I literally just come up with a pattern on the spot. They're not necessarily pre-planned out. So let's move up again. So now instead of starting E, we're starting F, which is obviously only one fret up. So now we're gonna have this pattern is gonna look a little bit different. It's gonna be F, E, then instead of A, we're going to across to B, and then C. So now look, these two little groups here are only one fret apart. F, E, and then B, C. So far we have this. And then let's keep moving up one more time, and then I'll just kind of play through it. So instead of F, E, we started in F before, now we're gonna start in G. So G, F, C, D. And you'll see, obviously, some of them do have the exact same shape. So you wanna take notes of those spots in the key that are gonna have the exact same shape when you create your patterns, right? This shape at G, F, C, D is actually the exact same shape that we had in the beginning with D, C, G, A, right? So let's hear what that pattern sounds like. I'm just gonna play through the whole entire thing. And then you can actually do it backwards too. So this one is a little bit more complicated, and actually I had to stop and think just for a split second there when I was playing through it. So that's why I wanted to start with just two notes, right? One note on each string. It's a lot easier if you start getting those little super tiny patterns going, because then it gets your brain moving in the right direction to be able to do this kind of thing. So let's hear what it sounds like doing some improvising with that idea as our basis for the solo. So that one, it sounds like a little bit more modern to me, in my opinion, because there's actually, if we really analyze it, there's some fifth intervals in there. That's a fifth interval. So again, hope that you're starting to get this idea. Now, next thing that we're gonna do and last thing we're gonna do is we can take this idea that we've been using just on these two, what we call adjacent strings, right? Because both these strings are right next to each other, the second and the first string. And now if we know the notes on all the other strings, we can actually do this onto non-adjacent strings. So let's move our notes down actually. So we have the notes there in the key that will be on the third string. So check that out. Now we can use this exact same concept, but now we're gonna get even cooler sounding stuff. So let's just keep it simple and let's make a 2-note pattern again, but now on these non-adjacent strings. So what if we start on this A here, on the 2nd fret 3rd string, and then we'll go up to G. By the way, sometimes I like to repeat each of the little cells before I move them up. Something like that, right? So you should know the process by now. We're just gonna move this up. So instead of A and G, now we're gonna start on B and take the next note after G. So we have B and A. And now instead of B and A, we're gonna take C and B. And then now after that comes D and C. After that comes E and D. After that comes F and E. After that comes G and F. And after that, we start basically back at the beginning again with A and G, because now we're past the 12th fret, right? So, as you can see, we could go on forever doing all kinds of stuff with this. You could do 2 super far away strings, like you could use the 1st string and the 5th string and get crazy, crazy interval skips in your pattern. But let's see, the last thing we'll do is just play a quick solo using this pattern here. So this one that we started with from A to G. 1, 2, 3, 4. So, of course, if I'm really using this in a real solo, I'm going to allow myself to create more variations. I might not just stick with that exact same pattern the whole time, but it's just for demonstration purposes of each pattern. So, if you found this video helpful, make sure you drop a thumbs up below. And make sure you pick up your copy of the 10 essential improvisation patterns so that you can have them tabbed out for you. Of course, that's only some of the ones that you can come up with, right? But you can have them tabbed out for you, not just on 2 strings, but have them actually change strings, starting off on 2 strings and then going all over the entire fretboard so that you can really dig into each one of these patterns and develop a wide vocabulary of patterns that you can use in your soloing. So, hope you all enjoyed it, and until next time, listen, learn, and jam.